A comical World War II tactical bomber roguelite. There's a unique mix if ever I've talked of one, but to hell if it's one that doesn't work. Bomber Crew, and its expansion USAAF, is a quirky and occasionally brutal game set around the backdrop of, you guessed it, a bombing crew during the outset of World War II. The game, as the expansion implies, is spread across two different campaigns. The main campaign, along with much of the DLC, centers around flying a British Lancaster out of England to bomb much of Nazi Europe. Not to say you are flying the aircraft, mind you, no. The game is instead about you controlling a crew, controlling a bomber, each member given a role with specific training involved. So if you want to turn gently left, you can't just move the rudders a bit and do so, no. You need a navigator to chart a course and then have the pilot adjust to that course. If an enemy gets on your tail, you can't take to the guns and do a barrel roll, no. But you can tell your pilot to undergo one of a few maneuvers and highlight enemy targets so any available gunners will take aim with any ability they might have whilst your radio operator calls in fighter support. It's an oft frustrating approach to control which can quickly break down in the chaos of combat without methodical touch, but I won't call it unrewarding. Don't pay attention and you'll find systems breaking down, crew members falling to bullets or cold or lack of oxygen, and your Lancaster wildly off course until it's inevitably taken enough beating But find your groove and your crew will perform like a well-oiled machine, especially as they build up experience and skill sets. And here I suppose I should talk about how you can build up your crew and aircraft, as well as the roguelite part of the game. Bomber Crew doesn't reset progress when you lose any or all of your crew or your aircraft is destroyed. What happens instead is you'll get a new aircraft and a new selection of crew members based on what's been lost with skills brought up to roughly barely keep pace with the game. So if you lose a gunner at the beginning, you'll get a selection of gunners to choose from which will all begin at level 1. Later in the campaign, they might be a couple levels higher. Or if your Lancaster is destroyed, you'll get a fancy new one, free of charge, with maybe a couple gun or equipment upgrades. The system is designed to offer decent punishment if you lose anything whilst allowing the player to progress, but unfortunately it doesn't lend itself well to balance at all, especially with the inclusion of DLC. We'll start with your crew members. At the beginning of the game they'll be bare bones. The clothes on their back and enough training to operate a station, but not much else. Gunners shoot guns to defend your lonely aircraft. The mechanic looks at your fuel levels. The radio operator receives radio updates and scans with radar. The navigator shows your position on the map and charts your course. The pilot flies and follows the course. And the bombardier releases bombs and takes surveillance photos. At the most bare-bones level, these jobs are mostly interchangeable, in so much as everyone can perform the most bare-bones functions. But the game can quickly overwhelm an inexperienced crew. Want anything even remotely more complex and you'll want a more experienced crew member. Gunners find themselves being overwhelmed? That's where focus fire and different ammunition types come into play. Want to auto-track enemies or call in Spitfire support? That radio man better stick around for a minute. Want to navigate at higher altitudes or set custom courses? Your navigator is going to need plenty of experience. Want to adjust your aircraft speed or consume less fuel or fix problems faster? Put a few missions on your mechanic's belt. Want to make any sort of emergency maneuvers? Your pilot needs a know-how. Want to take photos above spitting distance from the ground? Your bombardier needs the experience. As you level up your crew, you can also give them a secondary job. Make a gunner a mechanic or a medic capable of healing people faster or without the use of medkits. Allow your bombardier the capabilities of a gunner. Allow your pilot to... doesn't really matter, because if your pilot goes down or moves from a seat, then your crew and aircraft may as well collectively kiss their asses goodbye. Along the way, you can outfit them with a variety of gear which can increase their armor, protection from cold, oxygen supply, and water and land survival, not to mention style, at the cost of movement speed. The oxygen and cold weather gear all but required for extended durations at high altitude, where your aircraft will be beyond the engagement of most enemies at the cost of more difficult bombing, navigation, and, of course, the cold and lack of oxygen. It's a decent system, but lose a crew member, especially one of the central quadruple of pilot, mechanic, and especially navigator and radio man, and you'll suddenly be down some rather crucial functionality, which is a grind to build back up again, making missions suddenly and needlessly far more difficult, to the point where one might argue it's more enjoyable to just reboot the game when you notice high-level crew about to die. Then there's the Lancaster. Your default bomber has all the functionality it needs to go out and bomb any target on the map, but the systems in place you'll quickly find are far too underwhelming. As you complete missions and unlock parts, you'll be able to upgrade your aircraft one piece at a time. Grab sheets of armor for some of the more vulnerable or critical locations on your Lancaster. Grab better engines to carry more weight and tank more damage. Upgrade your hydraulics and O2 so they don't fail mid-flight at random and are less susceptible to enemy fire, taking away your flight controls and ability to sustain high altitudes, respectively. Get an improved radar so your sweeps come in faster. Load up bigger guns to, shoot things better. Or even load up an ammo belt so your gunners no longer have to make trips to the ammo station between magazines. Load up equipment racks with fire extinguishers for fires which may break out, health kits for downed crew members, and parachutes in case you need to bail out. Equip a carrier pigeon to increase your crew's chance of rescue in case the plane goes down. The DLC brings out, among other things, missiles you can utilize to quickly deal with hostile fighters in one of the more overpowered editions. You can even customize your aircraft's livery and name as you see fit. It's a fun and solid customization system, but much like the crew, it's hampered by how easy it all is to lose. The aircraft goes down behind enemy lines or crashes, and that's it. All the time and money you spent upgrading it goes bye-bye, and you're stuck grinding out missions to build yourself back up to where you were, all the while the game mercilessly pounds your new aircraft into oblivion. Meaning, again, one could argue that if you know you're about to lose your aircraft, it might just be better to cold reset and avoid the whole roguelite part of the game entirely. Which is unfortunate. While the idea behind making the game a roguelite is fun, in practice it just winds up being a grind. On the other hand, if left to upgrade endlessly, your bomber will become insanely overpowered, to the point where nothing in the game proves a remote danger. Well, almost. Which I suppose brings us to the missions themselves. You pick from a variety of missions which will give a generalized danger level and tell you to bomb this or that target. Sometimes there's an enemy ace patrolling the level. Occasionally there's specialized missions which will require hitting harder targets. Every once in a while they'll just want you to take pictures. But after selecting your mission, you'll be thrown onto a runway with your Lancaster and 7 crew members. You tell your pilot to take off and retract gear, your navigator will start setting course for objective, and in this stage above England, you'll have the opportunity to fast forward until you reach the English Channel. From here you begin guiding your crew around to get the bomber to where it needs to go and get back home. If there's a mechanical failure, you'll send a crewman to fix it. If it's a longer run, you'll probably set for lean fuel. An experienced radar operator and navigator will allow you the capability to chart courses around enemy defenses, but eventually you'll come across enemy fighters and either tag them manually or have your radio operator do so automatically, and your gunners will begin firing. Planes will sweep in and attack different hardpoints along your aircraft, trying to knock you out of commission, and you'll maneuver your gunners around to best fight them off, likely moving your mechanic and bombardier into gunner positions to better defend all angles and knock the Nazi bastards out of the sky. Enemy bullets will tear holes into your Lancaster in a rather impressive display, and you'll see the status of individual systems and parts in a corner of your screen. Occasionally an engine might start on fire, in which case you can either extinguish it with your upgraded systems or send somebody out to do so manually and fix it back up in air. But careful about performing any maneuvers or turning your aircraft, or your hapless mechanic might find themselves in a sudden free fall. If a crew member is injured, you can fix them up with the help of a medic, medkit, or bed. But watch out that they aren't knocked out, lest a timer begins counting down to their permanent demise and only a medkit can save them. Eventually you'll come to your target and move to a comfortable altitude to hit it, moving your bombardier into position and charting a direct course. Open the bay doors, release bombs, or take pictures on target. Usually there is also one or two optional objectives, typically a recon folder you can take, which will earn you more points to spend on upgrades once the mission is over. Close the bay doors and get back to friendly territory before the enemy overwhelms you. If an ace is in the area, they may attack any time along the route. With larger health pools and deadlier guns, they can quickly knock out systems or crew without focused fire. It can be a challenge to knock out with weak weapons or poor gunners. But if you manage it, they too are worth a reward. You'll get back to England, or not, but I'm afraid the threat's not over. Still need to land, which means extending landing gear, which means if one or both your gear has been knocked out, which is very common, you're in some real trouble. It's easy enough, of course, to tell everyone to bail out, but it's a coin flip by this point whether or not your Lancaster can make a crash landing, or just crash. You could abandon it, save all your crew, but that means abandoning your Lancaster and all the upgrades you put into it, which makes these situations a frustrating design that you could successfully beat a mission and return, but to save your aircraft and avoid the grind of building a new one comes down to a complete random chance with a relatively low success rate, almost guaranteed to kill any remaining crew. But that's a bit of a nasty tendency within the game. It's a game of little frustrations you must work your way around, but some of these frustrations end up pushing just a bit too far. One of the early examples you'll quickly notice is clouds. So much of the game depends on fighting clouds to see the ground, either you playing the bombardier and trying to target correctly, or your navigator attempting to chart a course. You'd figure this might be an occasional thing, that you'd have cloudy days and clear days, but the mechanic is far more simple and frustrating than that. At high altitude, you will only see clouds below you, even if the weather looks somewhat clear. Your navigator will be nearly useless unless it's night and they are high enough level to navigate by stars, and good luck with bombs. At medium altitude, your navigator might slowly be able to chart, and you will struggle to see any targets through the shifting clouds. You have to dip below and low altitude to see anything. As I said, a frustrating mechanic, and just as frustrating in its own way is how much of a breeze the game becomes by the end. With how powerful your Lancaster can become, as long as you're not constantly replacing it, there's no real threat to your aircraft and missions become a bit of a grind just to get done. But this coin flips as soon as you lose anything important, and suddenly you can be left in a frustrating struggle to do complete missions, much less come back safely. As a balance, the main campaign never quite gets down beyond the early game. This is all, of course, speaking of the main campaign. Then there's the expansion, USAAF. Focused vaguely on the US's Italian campaign, USAAF puts you in the skin of a B-17 flying fortress, which certainly goes out of its way to live up to its name here. Featuring more guns than you have gunners to realistically man them, all sporting ammo belts to help one little bit of management, and a couple additional crew to take up stations. The B-17 feels respectfully different from the Lancaster, even if it plays largely the same. The real difference, though, is the smaller quality of life improvements made along the way. While the expansion does play much the same as the main campaign, many of the complaints have been addressed. For example, the game has a much firmer grip on difficulty. Up and through the end of the game will provide a decent challenge to even surviving aircraft, though at a small cost I will address momentarily. It does this a few different ways, with more dangerous and numerous enemies who are far more aggressive to your crew, attacking far closer to base, through harder bombing targets which might take numerous bombs to destroy rather than the singular always required in the original, and through a toning back of some of your options and weaponry. Much fun as it might have been seeing a B-17 decked out in 20mm cannons and missiles, the lesser, though still quite powerful, guns here make for a far more balanced difficulty. The downside being, losing your aircraft might as well mean restarting the game. Like the original, your replacement will somewhat keep up, but the downgrade is always significant. There is much more of a grind for points and crew here. You lose your aircraft and it could be a long, long time before you catch back up to where you were, all the while attempting to manage a brutal difficulty which has climbed beyond your level. You lose a crew member, and whoever the replacement is probably won't learn their full skill set by the end. It honestly feels like the game was designed with the idea of players rebooting the game if they ever lose something important, because the loss, if you do, is much, much worse. The other annoyance, more easily dealt with, is the coin flip on the chance you lose a landing gear. While still certainly dangerous, you can attempt a belly landing, which is far more consistent than the Lancaster could dream to be. But some of the mechanics and design still frustrate a little unnecessarily. It feels like this expansion is where Bomber Crew really hit its stride. If you enjoy tactical games and games full of micromanagement, Bomber Crew certainly scratches an itch. The cutesy design belies a title whose difficulty can be frustrating, which demands a surprising amount of player attention lest your entire campaign go up in smoke. To that end, the game is certainly a success, though the frustrations can certainly add up quick and might annoy many a player too much too early. If you don't wish to deal with the intensive multitasking, you'll probably be better off skipping this one, but this is otherwise a fun little gem to get lost in.